For centuries, humans have been growing alongside our botanical brethren. Our histories have mixed and mingled to bring us modern medical marvels, faded folklore, and everything in between. Of course, in order to understand the plant, we have to start with its roots. I'm M. Grebner-Gaddis, and this is Rooted. Hello, and welcome back to another week of Rooted. This week, we're winding down the Deadly Potion series with an old friend and one of the most toxic plants in North America, the infamous hemlock. We're speaking fairly generally, but do note that there are a few different species of hemlock, with water hemlock being the most toxic. And the main difference in these plants tends to be the environmental preference, so while there are some differences, we're going to kind of just lump them all together here. Also, thank you for your added patience with this episode. It's been a hectic few weeks with a variety of ailments in my household, so we had to delay things a bit, but we're back to almost normal. Before we can finally dig in, it's time for your weekly disclaimer that I'm not a medical doctor, and you should not take advice from me, a lady who loves plants, over that of a medical professional, and also please don't poison anyone. Thanks. With that out of the way, we can finally discuss Conium magnicolum, or hemlock, which is native to certain parts of Europe, the Mediterranean, and South Africa, but has been naturalized pretty much everywhere. It's an umbellifer in the Apiaceae family, and it grows between 3 to 5 feet tall with a white flower made up of tons of tiny little blooms. Hemlock is a biannual, and it can grow in pretty much any kind of soil. If this is sounding at all familiar, it's likely because it is. Hemlock is commonly mixed up with Queen Anne's lace, which we talked about way back in episode 2. The way to tell them apart is that hemlock doesn't have a purple flower in the center, and it has a hairless stem with purple splotches, plus it smells disgusting when dug up. Somewhere between mouse pee and like a musty frat house basement? Yikes. And if you think that sounds bad, just wait until we get into how toxic it actually is. See, all parts of hemlock are poisonous to humans, but the potency really depends on the season and the part of the plant in question. In early spring, the root is at its most toxic, but its leaves are actually safe for some cattle to eat. And this is because, like its cousin the carrot, it's sending all of its nutrients and the stuff that kills us to its taproot for safekeeping in the winter. In the summer, the leaves become more toxic, and by June, it's starting to get its seeds ready for fall, when it will send those toxic little shits all over the place to start the cycle all over again. Just like Queen Anne's lace, in the fall, it starts to fold up and form a tiny little tumbleweed full of hairy seeds that are just waiting to latch onto something and spread themselves out. And because they aren't too picky about soil, and there's not a ton of bugs that really like them, hemlock has no issues outcompeting native species. Hemlock is poisonous to humans, livestock, and most other mammals. It isn't super tasty, but it is easily confused with wild carrot, which means it mostly poisons animals who eat it expecting a tasty snack, but instead get a bitter bite of something truly awful. One other common way people used to accidentally poison themselves with this stuff was by making pan flutes out of the dried stalks, also because they misidentified it. But this was mostly happening to Victorian-era children who apparently loved pan flutes and hated learning botany basics. While it isn't super common today, we do still see cases of hemlock poisoning. The most common symptoms are sweating, vomiting, dilated pupils, excessive salivation, dry mouth, rapid heartbeat, high blood pressure, restlessness or confusion, muscle weakness or twitches, tremors, and seizures. In more severe cases, hemlock poisoning can cause delayed complications, such as slow heartbeat, low blood pressure, muscle paralysis, muscle breakdown and muscle death, kidney failure, central nervous system depression, and eventually death. The reason hemlock is so toxic to us is because it contains a chemical called conine, which sends mixed signals to the muscles that control your breathing, basically telling them to stop and, well, eventually killing you. One interesting thing about conine poisoning is that animals who ingest it and live to tell the tale are actually more likely to eat it again. And this is especially bad news for any pregnant animals who may not have many long-term symptoms themselves, but pass on this very distinctive genetic defect to their offspring. The most famous death caused by hemlock poisoning was Socrates, but his death was not an accident. In fact, it's pretty much as far away from an accident as you can get. The story goes that Socrates was put to death in ancient Greece for corrupting the minds of young men. But because he was also still regarded as a gentleman, they let him choose how he wanted to die. So he chose hemlock tea. It's reported that his death was a peaceful one, where he was able to have coherent conversations with his followers until just drifting off to sleep, but some historians doubt that, knowing what we do today about how hemlock poisoning usually goes down. Another death with some lore around hemlock is actually the death of Jesus Christ. It's said that as Christ's blood rolled down into the field below, some of it got onto hemlock, staining it and making it toxic for the rest of eternity. Another interesting bit of lore from Christianity actually comes from the belief that hemlock gets its purple marks as a symbol of Cain, and the marks left upon his brow after his first murder. Either way, some super interesting stories from a plant that's usually linked strictly to witchcraft. The thing is, though, this plant has never just been linked to witchcraft. In fact, there actually aren't even that many ties to early pagans or even ancient gods. It's mostly been linked to witchcraft because of old wives' tales and hearsay. One great example of a non-witchy use for hemlock comes to us from 17th century England, where doctors frequently used it as an early anesthetic. Making it sounds kind of like people were just rooting around in their pantries and mixing stuff together, but I guess it had to be better than being awake while people sawed your arm off? Maybe, I guess. Here's how one medieval scholar described the process. Take 3 spoonfuls of the gall of a barrow swine for a man, and for a woman of gilt, 3 spoonfuls of hemlock juice, 3 spoonfuls of wild neep, 3 spoonfuls of lettuce, 3 spoonfuls of pape, 3 spoonfuls of henbane, 3 spoonfuls of vinegar, and mix them all together, then boil them and put them in a glass vessel well stopped, and put thereof 3 spoonfuls into a pottle of good wine, and mix until well together. Basically, what you're going to do is mix equal parts stomach acid from a pig, hemlock juice, rutabaga, wild lettuce, opium, henbane, and vinegar. Boil those together, mix in with a glass of wine, and knock someone out cold before you rip out their spleen or whatever else you're trying to do. I kind of feel like the wine and opium would have been enough. Today, we aren't doing anything nearly as exciting or risky with this stuff. In fact, the vast majority of people are honestly told to avoid hemlock as it's so toxic and tricky to work with. There are some exceptions, though, the most stereotypical of which is witchcraft, but I'd like to note, not historically, this is like more New Age stuff. Hemlock is still sometimes part of ceremonies and rituals. Often it's used as a hexing agent in spells that could otherwise be intended for good. For example, you might add just like a little bit of hemlock to a spell more commonly used to encourage good fortune to deny that good fortune to someone who's wronged you. It can also be used to strengthen protection spells and to anoint tools of protection. And the idea there is that if you're already in possession of the thing that's meant to hurt you, you can stop it from causing any further harm. Due to how risky it is to work with hemlock, it's no surprise that there aren't a ton of modern-day medical uses. While in some practices and cultures, hemlock is still used as a treatment for whooping cough and bronchitis because of the way it tells the muscles you use to breathe and cough to chill out, there isn't a ton of evidence to support that it's worth the risk associated with its usage. Moving into modern true crime, we're actually going to take a closer look at a 2022 case from Indiana that leverages a few of the plants we've talked about on this podcast, but didn't make the cut for this series. Picture it with me. It's a warm, sunny day in August of 2022. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and in a small town in Indiana, two absolutely wretched women are conspiring to commit murder for a little extra money. By all accounts, their intended victim, Harold Peanut Allen, is a kind, family-focused man who had a small but comfortable nest egg in the form of his retirement fund and insurance policy. A nest egg which, given an opportune tragedy, would give his wife Marcia and daughter Ashley Jones a little bit of extra padding. Without wasting much time, these two get to work texting and scheming up all the different ways they could stage an accident. He was diabetic, maybe give him too much insulin. No, they could see that in the autopsy. They could push him down the stairs, but what if that didn't work? Then he would for sure know they were going to try and kill him. Instead, these women would go on to try and poison this man several times in a way that makes Aunt Debbie from the Addams Family Values look like a literal saint. These ladies were worried about getting caught with insulin, but assumed no one would ever find their text messages or Etsy purchase history, where they first bought toxic pong seeds that they ground up and put into a tray of brownies for Harold. To their horror, he ate the brownies, and while he got a little sick, he just did not die. Next, they ordered foxglove seeds and also got their grubby little hands on some water hemlock, which they mixed into 3 dishes, including a bowl of chili on December 9th, some soda on the 10th, and a margarita on December 12th. Of course, these also all made him very sick, but he still somehow managed to live. At this point, the two were getting irritated and desperate, so they ordered a gallon of antifreeze and poured a lethal dose into his root beer float. Then they rushed to the hospital, claiming he fell down the stairs. Tragically, Harold did pass from this incident, but his death was actually initially ruled an accident and no foul play was suspected. That was until October of 2023, when Ashley got a little bit greedy and hired 2 burglars to rob her mother's house. Marcia figured out she was behind it pretty quickly because when they broke in, they opened a safe that only Ashley would know the combination to. And when the police took the robbers in for questioning, they were pretty quick to air out Marcia and Ashley's dirty laundry. It didn't take police much digging to find the text messages, transaction history, and an awful lot of other evidence. Marcia would take her own life after being questioned by police, and Ashley's trial wrapped in August of this year, 2025, where she pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. All other more serious charges were dropped as a part of the plea deal, so Ashley will instead serve a maximum sentence of 50 years in prison. That's all I've got for this week. Next time you see a field of white, lacy-looking flowers, I encourage you to take a closer look. You might just be surprised at how common poison hemlock is and how frequently you've looked an ancient killer in the eye without ever even knowing it. As always, thank you so much for listening and for allowing me to share these stories with you. I've been delighted and surprised by how many of you are really enjoying the show, and I can't wait to keep sending more cursed history facts and plant secrets your way. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. If you like this show, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. You can also find us on social media at rooted.pod on Instagram and TikTok. We're on YouTube at rooted.podcast, and you can check out our website rootedpod.com for transcripts, updates, and so much more. Thank you so much for being here and for learning with me. This show would not be possible without your support. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, be kind to the earth, and just like a plant, drink your water. Rooted, a Plant Podcast, is a Henbane Media LLC production. It's written and produced by me, M. Grumner Gaddis, with theme music by Eric Clarkson.